Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Scottish Running Podcast with myself, Sean Gaffney, and Pete. He might come on at some point. Well, fingers crossed that he does, but he's on my t-shirt as of right now. This is a picture of Pete from last week when I destroyed him by 30 odd seconds. So that's him coming into the finish. And today's guest for me, is a bit of a Scottish running legend. This guy has done it from cross country, from 3,000 right up to, mountain running. He's done it for Scotland. He's run for GB and he's won a couple of marathons abroad as well with some very impressive marathon times. So please welcome Mr. Fraser Clyne. So, Fraser, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Sean. Thank you for inviting me onto this. I was looking back at some of your other guests over the past year. One of my old teammates, Laurie Spence, and of course Liz McColgan.
Oh yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
delighted to be amongst that company again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you were in the Commonwealth Games, the same Commonwealth Games team as us at the Edinburgh. Was
In,
that right?
in '86, yeah, and of course her performance was the highlight of the Scottish track team that year. It wasn't a particularly great year, I don't think, for Scottish medals on the track, but Liz was the one that lit up the whole place, and that was really her first major big breakthrough.
Yeah, because I was reading. You've probably seen. I had her book. Found it
Yeah,
in a charity shop. But I was reading through it. It was like, I didn't know that about that Commie Games. It was quite the host nation. They weren't doing too well, and then Liz came on, and yeah, she destroyed the field. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think it was disappointing being on home ground. You're always looking for the Scots to do really well, and until she came along and won that gold medal, it had been a pretty low key up until that point. That kind of just gave everybody a bit of a boost, I think.
yeah, absolutely good for morale, etc. as well. But it must have been great. Was that your first Commonwealth Games team?
Yeah, it was my first and only
First
Commonwealth
and
Games.
only.
Um, yeah, I was quite a late starter in the sport, actually. I didn't, I was never involved when I was at school. It was only when I went to uni that I got into it. Before that, I was a failed footballer. My dad played semi-professional football for Arbroath,
Oh.
which is where I'm from. But I was never meeting up to his standards in football, as my old football teammates will quickly tell you. Um, so it was only when I went to uni and I kind of got fed up with the football, and I actually thought, well, what could I try as a different sport? And we had done a little bit of running at school. There was one day I remember the the weather was really bad. The football pitch was flooded. The school gym was being used for something else, and the PE teacher said, "Right, guys, I'm sending you out for a run around that park." It was about probably less than a mile. And so we're all sent out on that run. And I came back and I beat all the footballers. And they went, "Oh, all right, okay." And the PE guy said, "Oh, there's things like Scottish schools, cross-country championships, things like that that we might look to." But of course, the following week, the football was back on. That was the last I ever heard of it. But I always remembered that. So when I was at uni, I thought, well, what else could I do? And I thought, oh, I remember that run at school. So I went along it was at Aberdeen Uni at the time, and I went to the cross country club and said, I want to join. And they said, oh, maybe better come and try it first. But that was the way into it. And I was really lucky at the time that there were a lot of good guys at the club. They weren't outstanding runners, but they were just really good people. But there was one guy, a mature student, guy called Steve Taylor, who was I thought he was ancient and a mature student. He was probably about 30, but as a teenager, you think all these people are really old. But Steve was a former Scottish 3 mile and 6 mile champion. Might have been the 1 mile champion at one point. He certainly won a number of Scottish titles in the late 1950s, early 60s. And he kind of took me under his wing and introduced me to interval training and stuff like that. But there were other guys there, guy called Tony Millard, who took me out in some of my first runs. it was just a lot. A guy, Ron Mon, who became Professor Ron Mon, he was one of the top exercise physiologists. In fact, he was the British Olympic Association. He was involved with them for many, many years. But he used to experiment on all the runners when he was a student. But he became one of the top guys in exercise physiology in the world over a long period of time. He used to go to all the Olympic Games. So all these guys were around at the time, and it was really, I knew nothing about running, but they were all willing to help and share ideas and get me training, and that's how it really all started. So, I'm ever indebted to them. I might have been, a failed footballer, but at least I got on to running for Scotland in GB. But so getting into Commonwealth Games, because as I said, I wasn't started till I was 18, 19, 20. So Commonwealth Games, I was 31 was my first Commonwealth Games. Would that be right? Yeah, 1986. Yeah. So, I was quite, as I say, a late developer, if you like. And by the time the 1990 games came around, I didn't quite make the team. We didn't send any marathon runners to that. It was a bit controversial at the time. We had faster guys than me, but they didn't want to do it. And I think, yeah, for whatever reason, I think it was pretty close, but I didn't get picked for it. So, but there were so many good marathons at the time, it didn't really matter. It's obviously brilliant to be able to represent your country in something like that, but there was lots of other opportunities as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact he made at least one Commonwealth Games marathon, that's just amazing to represent
Yeah,
Scotland
but
and at a Scottish Commonwealth Games as well.
oh yeah. I mean, as I say, I'm absolutely really proud to have done that. I didn't perform as well as I'd hoped to. Ironically, that was in all my running days. That was the one year I had more problems with injuries than ever before, and I kind of knew just on the starting line. You know whether you're in great shape or not. I knew I was fit, but yeah, I had these problems with my lower back, and I was really stiff, and I just knew it was going to be hard work. So yeah, I say I didn't run particularly well. I finished 10th in 2:17, but I remember coming onto the track at Meadowbank at the finish, and obviously the place was full, and everybody wearing a Scotland vest was getting this almighty cheer. And I thought, oh, can you imagine? You're struggling around that last lap of the track, and everybody's, the place is going wild. I was just thinking, imagine what it would have been like if you're finishing in the top three.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was quite an emotional experience, just the fact that everybody's cheering for you, but at the same time, inside you're thinking, "Oh, I'm not really doing too well here." But again, as you say, it's fantastic to have done it, and fantastic to look back on having been part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, even though you finished 10th in 2017, like, how far were you away from like the medals?
Ah, well, quite a bit. I mean,
Quite a bit.
Rob de Castella, the Australian, won in I think 2:10 something. And I think silver and bronze were in the 2:11s, 2:12 range. So yeah, I mean, it was never really competitive. John Graham, my teammate, he finished fourth that year. In fact, John, he would be a great guy for you to get on the podcast. He's a fantastic character. A bit like, I used to think he was a running Billy Connolly. He was really funny guy, but an outstanding athlete as well. And John, unfortunately, finished fourth at the '82 Commonwealth Games and fourth at Edinburgh in '86. It's the two, the one position you don't want to finish in twice. But again, fantastic performances, but not just missing out must be so frustrating.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Same as that guy, John Brown, the GB marathon runner, came
Yeah,
fourth
fourth.
twice to Olympics, and you're like, oh god.
I know.
I think it was the one in Athens. It was like it kind of fell into place for because Tergat fell off, and then I think that guy Stefano Baldini he went on and
Yeah,
won it. But I think that
aye,
John Brown he was there, right, and it was all falling into
yeah,
place, and then just
yeah.
fourth place
Nobody
again. But
remembers you if you're fourth.
no, no,
Yeah,
well only in your own nation, but
aye.
But no,
Yeah.
that's a shame. But no, I need to track down John Graham and get him on then. Certainly a
Yeah,
great guest.
well, as I say, he's a brilliant character. You can just switch on and let him talk, and that'll be it for an hour.
We've got a local runner called Tommy Murray. Well, he used to be a runner.
Oh yeah,
And that's what we did with Tommy. Just like hit record and Tommy just spoke. He's got so many stories and all
yeah,
sorts.
yeah. I know Tommy is another great character and
Yeah.
fantastic athlete. Yeah,
You see, you when I said to you about, you've done it from, 3,000 right up to, mountain running. Tommy as well, he said he was training for a marathon, but then something happened, they wouldn't pay for his flight, and he was like, no, well, and he was already really fit, so he went and did the World Mountain Running Championships. It was in Edinburgh, and he
yeah.
came second. He's like, but he said went off too quick. I was like, imagine that. Training for a marathon, then, and if he ended up becoming world mountain running champion, imagine that.
Not bad as a sideline, eh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously we've kind of skipped a good bit to your Commonwealth Games, but when you after when you joined running in university and stuff, what was like your first race after you did a bit of running with the uni?
Well, that's interesting. My very first race was the Edinburgh to Glasgow Road Relay, which in the for many years was kind of the premier club road running event in Scotland. It was, I don't know if you know
Mhm.
much about it, but the history of it. But an 8 stage relay, obviously from Edinburgh to Glasgow, each stage different length. And it was restricted to the top 20 clubs in the country in any one year. And it was a bit like Champions League sort of thing. I think the first 16 from the previous year automatically qualified, and then the next best four clubs based on the National Cross Country Relay Championships. So it came like a couple of weeks after the national relays. Uh, so it was restricted to the top 20. So it was kind of a big thing. And for some reason, Aberdeen Uni had qualified, and but we didn't have a very good team. We had an enthusiastic team, and I was chucked in. We'd had a trial for the team a couple of weeks before, and I'd only just started, but I managed to get in the top 8 for the uni. So I got into the team, and I had no idea what this race was like. I knew nothing at all. I think I was on stage 5, and when I saw the leaders coming in, I took off my top and everything. I'm standing there in my vest and shorts, and it's sleeting, snow, and freezing cold. And of course, Aberdeen Uni are last. And our guy's about 15 minutes behind the leader, and I'm standing around getting colder and colder. And then I'm set off, run the whole way on my own. and and I think we finished 19th out of 20 clubs that year. And I don't think Aberdeen Uni's been in it. Well, they were never in it again after that. Uh, and I ran under, I have to admit now, I don't care if I get banned now, but I ran under a false name.
All right.
Because they hadn't entered me by the time, when they had to enter the names for the race, I hadn't even appeared on the scene. But then I beat some of the guys that they had entered. So I had to run under this guy's name. Paddy McGill was his name, an Irishman.
Yeah.
So my debut in Scottish athletics was as Paddy McGill.
That's brilliant. So imagine if Power of Ten was here, he'd be like Paddy McGill ran a great time at the.
Well, he didn't. But, but that was my first one. But with Aberdeen Athletic Club in the 80s, we actually won that race
Yeah.
three times, I think, which was, as I say, it was kind of a big deal on the club scene at that time. So I've experienced Edinburgh to Glasgow from both ends, from being right at the back to being at the front.
Yeah, because I heard all about it. When Laurie Spence used to coach me, he used to say, there was a relay back in the day, and they don't do it anymore. I think they do the route now, but it's just done as like an ultra race. So I
Oh
think it's just
yeah,
I think it's just an individual, but there's no relay. So
no, yeah. What used to
maybe
be, it was held on the main roads, and it just became crazy. It was far too dangerous.
I
Uh,
imagine so.
yeah.
Try to do it on the motorway, etc. I don't
Well,
think that would get done well now.
and I mean, it finished in George Square as well. So in fact, that first year I did it, it was still held on a Saturday.
Oh,
Imagine into Glasgow city centre on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh, that just wouldn't fly.
Crazy.
It just wouldn't fly. Oh,
Yeah,
so that was your first race, and obviously with
yeah.
the uni and stuff. So, and after that, during your time at uni, did you get into a more of a good routine with the training with the good people you had around you, and then you started seeing a lot of improvements, obviously.
Yeah, as I said, I was lucky that the guys there were really good and helped me quite a lot. So, but I was never doing, in fact, about a year ago, I was looking back through my old diaries. I didn't really keep an accurate training diary, but I was looking back to what I had noted, and I was probably running 25 miles a week, something like that. Um, and so that was like 74, 75, 1975. Um, and yeah, I mean, I just did all the uni cross country stuff, wee bit of track in the summer, but nothing special. And then 76, I I was kind of, I could see the progress, just by consistent training. I was getting further and further up the field in races, nothing spectacular, but, I could see, oh, this is quite good. If you train well, you can improve. And so by 1976, I think I was fourth in the Scottish Unis cross country championships. And I was delighted with that because that was in the February, but in the December, there used to be an annual fixture, Scottish universities against Scottish Cross Country Union, and I can't remember, civil service. It was about Northern Ireland. It was, about six representative teams, and the Scot Unis was one of them. And they would pick 12 guys for that, and I never got picked for it. And at the time, at that point, I thought I was, I might have got a place in that team, but I didn't. So I wrote the 12 names up on a piece of paper and pinned them on my wall. I thought, right, I'm going to get you guys. So by the February at the Scottish Unis, I finished fourth. So, in fact, I think Laurie might have been one of the guys that beat me that day. I'm not sure because he was definitely running for Strathclyde at that time. Um, so that was kind of a big boost, getting fourth place in that. And then that summer, I started doing a bit more track. I did 3,000 steeplechase, and I got a bronze medal in the British Universities Championships down in London. So again, that was kind of my first, certainly my first championship track medal. And also in '76, Aberdeen won the junior men's team title at the Scottish Cross Country Championships at Coatbridge. I think I finished sixth that day. And that was, again, winning a national medal. In fact, I think that was the first medal of any description I won, was the national
Yeah,
under 20 team gold medal.
a good one,
And
a good one to get a national medal.
it was good. I think Nat won the under 20 race that year. So again, just all these chipping away at it and just getting that little bit better. And every time you get something like that, you get a bit more self-belief and a bit more confidence, and also there's that motivation to think, well, I'm starting to beat guys that a year ago I was nowhere near. So, I just have to try and keep this going. So I did, and I finished at Aberdeen, but I decided I quite like student life, so I did a postgrad course at Glasgow Uni. And the main reason for that was because Glasgow Uni always beat us in the Scottish Unis cross country championships. They'd won it about goodness knows how many years in a row. So I thought it's like jumping ship to a team that always wins. So I went to Glasgow, and my 2 years there, we won the Scottish Unis both times, and I won the individual title once, and I was second the other year. So yeah,
Well,
uni days were good.
if you can't beat them, join them. Why not?
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, the uni scene. Yeah, it's especially now. It seems a lot more popular as well. I think the British University Championships. I've seen videos online that was like the cross country one not that long ago, and the crowds just looked amazing. Looks like
yeah.
a good atmosphere, and I think a lot more people are getting into running now as well.
Aye. Yeah, well, I mean, in my lifetime, it's amazing how the sport has changed from, as I say, I started in the mid 70s, and I reckon the late 70s, I would probably know every runner in Aberdeen because there wasn't many of them. There weren't many people running. Whereas now it's, there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands. And I mean, that all started kind of early 80s with the first London Marathon and the first Great North Run seemed to be the catalyst for people getting into the sport. And it's just gone on from there. It's
Yeah,
absolutely phenomenal. And it's brilliant, because as I say, I would say in Aberdeen in the late 70s, there maybe 20 to 30 people that you would see running. Whereas I was down at the local park run this morning, there was about 350 people there, and that's not unusual. So it's
yeah,
just really exploded, and it's absolutely fantastic to see.
yeah. Same as the park run as well. The amount of people have got into running just from the park run, and I think people are just really realizing, a 5K, as soon as you do it, you're like, well, that wasn't that bad. And then they go, I'm going to try a 10K. Then it's half, then it goes right up to the marathon. But for me, the marathon is a completely other beast. I think the other distances, 5 and 10K, you can get away with very
Yeah,
little training if you want to just like complete them. But the marathon, it's the only distance where you need to, even just to finish, you need to properly train for a good
yeah,
3 4 months. You can't just go, wow, I'll just
yeah.
half arse it. No, you can't.
There's
For
no
me,
shortcuts.
no, no,
Yeah,
literally no shortcuts at all.
or you'll be
But,
found out.
oh yeah, yeah, but it's a great event. I love it. But we're going to go into your marathon stuff in a wee while anyway, because you had some great marathon times. But whilst we're on the subject of cross country, I think I first came across your name, when Laurie Spence was coaching me and found videos on YouTube. Someone somewhere had found it was like, I don't know if it was like Sports Scene or Sports Week or
Yeah,
whatever. And they did like, it was a good feature on the Scottish Cross Country Championships. And then it was, here come, and showing the guys before it. I'll post a link on the chat, on
yeah,
the Facebook page, just so as everyone can see it. But it was I first came across your name, and here comes Fraser Clyne, recent winner of the California Marathon and Sacramento, and then here comes Nat Muir and Laurie Spence and Alistair Braidwood, and
and
then
George Braidwood. Yeah,
yep, and there's all these other runners, and I was like, back then I was just like, I just thought Laurie Spence was, he was the best of everyone, and then I was like, who's all these people that like beating Laurie? So, and then obviously yourself as well, and then you do some research, and obviously Nat Muir he kicked away from everyone, but you were in the medals. It was what I think it was down in Irvine, I think.
yeah. I think both of these. I only saw these videos a few years ago.
Yeah,
Somebody put them on the internet, obviously, and it was really funny to see. I think '83 was the Jack Cain Centre in Edinburgh, and '84 was at Irvine, and I finished third both times. Nat won both of them. George Braidwood from Belhouston was second in the '83 one, and Alistair Hutton was second at Irvine. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's incredible. These were shown originally on Sports Scene on Saturday evening, along with the football. Can you imagine that now? Cross
imagine.
country getting that profile in Scotland.
I think
But
I think it should.
yeah, but we never saw it. Of course, I don't think anybody had video recorders in these days, but we never saw them because, like down in Irvine, by the time we got back to Aberdeen, it was too late. The program had been on, or I should say, by the time we got back to Aberdeen, went to the pub, and then got home, we'd missed the program.
I
So,
guess.
so the first time I saw these was, as I say, a few years ago, and it's a bit cringy as well. See how dated it is. But yeah, I mean, I love cross country. I think more people should probably do it. Traditionally it was always the thing everybody did in the winter, and I hear people now saying, "Oh, can't do that because it's going to impact on my preparations for the track season or whatever." It's a load of nonsense. Loads. Paula Radcliffe, I think the year um, she broke the world marathon record. I think she ran the world cross anyway. Liz McColgan used to do the world cross and then went on to win the London Marathon. And I remember in 1984, the World Cross was held in New Jersey, just outside New York. And of the top 10 finishers in the men's race, I think there was quite a number of them went on to medal at the Los Angeles Olympics just 3 or 4 months later. So their preparations obviously were not affected by having done the World Cross Country Championships.
I'm a big advocate of it, cross country, and people. There's a couple of boys in my running club as well, and I'm club captain, and I'm just like, no, just do cross country. I was like telling you, it'll pay dividends come the summer, and then they got PBs in the summer. I'm like, I told you, like it might not feel that in a cold December afternoon, it doesn't feel like it as that, but 6 months later, it will pay off.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a great thing because it kind of breaks up your winter anyway. You've got races to look forward to, and there's no pressure on chasing times because it's irrelevant. It's just being competitive, and the surfaces will vary, the distances vary. You just get a good hard workout, and with less risk of injury as well because you're running on softer ground. So there's nothing negative about it. It's just good, and the strength that you build up is the base on which you can build your speed in the
Yeah,
summer months. So yeah, it's good. I think nowadays, there's just so many opportunities to run road races at any time of year, and for a lot of people, there doesn't seem to be a structure to their year. It just seems I'll just
yeah.
race here, there, and everywhere all the time.
Yeah, I think there's fads. There's too many fads out there as well. Like in these running magazines. Not saying they're bad. The running magazines a lot of good information in them, but they'll say stuff like, "Oh, achieve your best ever 5K time within 5 weeks with this workout," and it's like that. It doesn't. No, that doesn't. No,
Yeah,
that's not the be all. If it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. It's
yeah,
that workout just develops whatever aerobic strength you've got at this time. It doesn't make you an Olympic champion, whatever.
yeah, yeah,
And I think a lot of people go, "Oh, I could just do that," and it's not.
yeah,
You need to do the not just the cross country. You need to do all the long slogging miles, and when you're feeling tired and still doing all the you don't need to run eyeballs out all the time. It needs to be stuff. It's like like marathon pace tempos, etc. for long
yeah,
periods of time. But then come the summer, like you said, that all that stuff pays off.
yeah. No, I think a lot of people run too hard all the time.
Yeah.
You see guys on Strava got a PB tonight in a 10K training run. What's the point in that?
Yeah, but well done. You got a medal on Strava.
Well, yeah, that's the downside of the technology now. There, I think everybody's trying to impress, or there's that added pressure all the time because everybody can see what you're doing. So there's a
Yeah,
tendency to maybe overdo the training.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that as well.
I know myself, even now when I go out, as soon as I switch on the Garmin, I feel this pressure to run a wee bit faster. Yeah, you think, why am I doing this? Yeah.
That's your old self. Back in
Aye.
the 80s, going, come on, we used to run at 5:10 a mile. Come on, now you're running at 5:10 a k. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. But that was a good thing when we didn't have the technology. You just ran as you felt.
Yeah,
You didn't
absolutely.
didn't worry about it. It was okay. I'm feeling good today, so I'm feeling good. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
what pace I'm running at, but it feels good.
That's you're from this. I'll go back to Laurie Spence's get again. He was saying, back in you guys day back in the 80s, if you ran a track race, there wasn't any pacemakers and stuff. Though that Laurie ran 2011 on the track and it was raced. It wasn't he sat in behind a pacemaker. No, it was raced.
Yeah,
And went for a championship. Oh, you guys, it was just a stopwatch you wore. And you just try to do as much damage to each other as you could to try and beat
yeah,
them.
yeah. But I think that was it. You always when you raced, it was racing. It was competitive, and that would you either you'd win a race or you'd get a good time. It didn't matter really, as long as you gave your all, and the time would look after itself. If you've run well, you'll get a decent time. But I can't think of going into many races with a specific time in mind. I know for some people that's important. I'd go into a race thinking, can I give my best today? Have I prepared well for it? Am I feeling good? Let's just see how it all works out. And normally that's when you got PBs. It wasn't pre-planned, wasn't right. Today I'm going to run, 14:20 or whatever for 5,000 meters. It's how well can I run today? And as I say, the time would look after itself. It wasn't the be all and end all. It's just about being competitive. And I think because there were probably a lot fewer races in these days, that when you went to a race, everybody else was there. So, now you can pick and choose. You can be a local hero and pick all the little races where there's not going to be much competition. But 30, 40 years ago, there were only a handful of races in Scotland. So when you went to a race, you knew by and large all the other guys would be there. So you knew you were going to have to run hard. And I think that was really, really beneficial, because you were there was no easy option ever. You were always running very, very competitively.
Yeah.
And I think that was true in cross country as well. I think the cross country season was really well structured, finishing with the national championships. You had the relays in the autumn, short races, then the district championships a wee bit longer, and then the national, which in these days was 7.5 miles, or what's that, about 12K.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, of course, you had a Scotland team for the World Cross, which came in March, and that was again 12K. So it kind of, you built up through the winter, all through the levels, up to the national, and then if you were made the Scotland team into the World Cross. So it was, kind of was a brilliantly structured season that came out of that. If you made the World Cross, that was an incredible race.
Yeah.
You
So
came
that's
out
the
of
next thing I was going to ask you is about the World Cross Country as well, because you qualified for a couple of teams, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I ran it 5 times. And I think my highest position was 97th.
Well, top 100 in the world. I mean,
But it was I to this day I still rate the World Cross as probably the hardest title for anybody to win. Certainly back in these days, because again you had everybody. The first time I went, I was totally overawed. I was looking around and I could see Olympic champions from just about every distance up to the marathon, 5K, 10K, even 1,500 meters. Uh, and world record holders. There was just so many people all in the one race. And I remember, most races start fast, and that started fast. I remember getting the first probably 400 meters thinking, geez, I'm sprinting here. And this never relented. Quite often there's a wee bit of a surge at the beginning and then it settles down into a nice rhythm, but it just seemed to keep going at that pace. I thought, I'm blown away. I was actually
I
really proud to finish in the top 100. But when you go home, I remember my dad saying to me, how did you get on? I said, I was 97th. He said, what went wrong? I said, I actually had a good run.
I know you find that as well. It's like people when you do a marathon stuff like that, marathons. For me, it's all about time. Not unless you're competing to win it. It's all about time. And people say, "Oh, where'd you finish?" I'm like, I don't know. They're like, well, "What'd you do it for?" I was like, "Because I'm trying to run a time, etc." But cross country it is all about places, etc. And well,
Yeah. I
if
remember,
for me, if I can finish top 100 international again, that'd be great. But finishing top
yeah.
100 in the world is incredible.
But we had, a really strong squad at that time. So I remember one of the years we had, Nat Muir, who
Hmm.
I think Nat's highest position in the World Championships was maybe seventh.
Oh,
Um, John
wow.
Robson, 1,500-meter runner,
Uh-huh.
finished fifth in the World Cross at Paris in 1980. Frank Clement, fourth in the Olympic 1,500 meters. Jim Alder,
Yeah.
Jim Alder, Commonwealth Games marathon champion, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Graham Williamson, world-class miler. Alistair Hutton went on to win the
uh,
London Marathon. I'm going to miss somebody out here, but it just goes on and on. Laurie, uh,
Well,
yeah, there were so many good people, and Jim Brown was another one. Jim Brown was world junior cross country champion in the 70s. So, Scotland actually had a really, really strong squad of runners that could have challenged there, but I don't think we ever did
yeah.
particularly well for whatever reason, but the potential was there. It was a really strong team. And I do remember one year, there used to be an international cross country race at Gateshead I think it was November. It
Mhm.
was a televised meeting, and it was a good quality race. I think it was maybe 5 miles, but it was like a mini world championships. They had teams from Scotland. The home countries were all represented, usually Belgium, Spain, and one year they had a rest of the world select team. And one year we actually won that team race. I was the fourth counter, and we had I think Alistair won the race. Nat was fifth after he was leading, and he slipped and fell. So with Alistair first, Nat fifth, John Robson was 11th, and I think I was 20th. And I, we only won by a few points because I remember battling with this English guy over the final couple of 100 meters and just getting the better of him. And there wasn't much in it, but for Scotland to win a thing like that was, I know it wasn't an official championships, but it was a big, big international race. And I think everybody then thought, oh, come the World Championships, we'll do really well, but it didn't happen.
Because there was a chat before. I don't know if it was just rumors or ideas for it. They should bring that back. If you're, for the World Cross Country Championships and Europeans, you should be it should be Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. Because Scotland would do quite well because like you
Yeah,
look at the athletes that Scotland have got just now, and if you sent, what, like even that, now like so like Jamie Crow and stuff like that, they're not up at level as Josh Kerr, but he's great, he's
yeah,
outstanding at cross country, and you could send a very very good team.
absolutely. I think it was a real blow when they did away with that, went for a GB team. Certainly, I'm convinced it affected the standard in Scotland for quite a number of years because you took away that incentive. Guys that maybe couldn't make a GB team, but they could make a Scotland team. And then, of course, that was cut off. So there was no real incentive. It took a bit away from the national championships because the big thing, okay, yeah, the nationals important in its own right, but the big thing was that you could also qualify for the world championships by doing it. And then that was taken away. So kind of, if you're finishing fifth, sixth, seventh in the national, it doesn't really mean very much. But in the past, that would have been good enough to get you into the international team. So,
Yeah,
I think it was definitely a negative for us. And, we still have four home countries in football. So why
yeah,
can't we have it in cross country running?
exactly. I agree with you. I think I wasn't there. I wasn't born in 1986, so but I was 1989, just after. But looking at the if you look at the performances and standards, they kind of did start to drop off, after they made that decision. So, like you
Yeah.
said, I think that incentive, people were just like, oh, what's the point now? Whereas if
Yeah.
you're competing and together in Scotland and really pushing yourself in every single race, then that does raise that standard. But if you take that incentive away, then yeah,
Yeah, and there's not many opportunities to run for Scotland in anything significant outside the Commonwealth Games now, because it used to be World Cross, used to be the World Mountain Running
Mhm.
Championships with teams in as well. So, that's all gone unless you can. And to be fair, I mean, there's been a lot of Scots representing Great Britain in these things now, but it just broadened the opportunity to a lot more people in the past
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
lost.
But well, just funny you mentioned mountain running there. So I was reading up on you did a bit of mountain running as well. So tell us about your mountain running career.
Um, I don't know. I think looking back, if I would change one thing, it would be that I try and be a bit more focused on one aspect of athletics rather than,
Yeah.
I would go, all right, I want to do a marathon, I want to do well in a marathon, I want to do cross country, I want to do track, I want to do mountain running. And, I was getting pulled in all sorts of different directions and being, reasonable at some of them, but not absolutely great in any one of them. So it was almost, it's one of the things that I think is great about running is that there are so many different challenges, whether it's the distance, 5K, 10K marathon, whether it's a surface you run on, track, roads, cross country, mountains, or trails now. There are so many different things you can go for. And I was always keen to test myself in all of these. But sometimes it wasn't too compatible. So I kind of set myself an objective. I thought, right, I've run the World Cross. I ran what used to be called the World Cup Marathon for GB. But I thought, well, World Mountain Running, I need to get that one ticked off as well. So I'm trying to remember how I qualified. I think, can't remember what the procedure was that year. It was maybe, I remember doing a Cairngorm hill race, which I finished third in, and maybe that was the selection race. I can't remember, but again, I got on the team and then I didn't really prepare for the
Mhm.
world's event as well
Yeah.
as I should have done. And it was a bit of a mind blower going from, it's one thing running up and down Cairngorm, but when you go to the Italian Alps and the altitude and the relentless climbing, I kind of struggled with that. I probably finished in the 40s, something like that. But it was just you know, as I say, it was just the fact that it was another challenge, another thing that I wanted to try to do. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed little hill races. There's one quite near here in Aberdeen, just out the road that I used to do every year. I think I won it 16 years in a row or something. I did it 20 odd times altogether, but it was just a totally different atmosphere, it's just totally relaxed and enjoyable, and you're out in nice surroundings, and there's no pressure at all. It's just a change of scene, and it's always good to do that. So it was never. I think I'd threatened to try and make the team for a number of years because I remember um, one of the guys. Oh dear, 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 I can't remember his name, but they used to joke about it that he's going to turn up for the trial this year, and he never does. He never does. So one year they had a cardboard cutout of me that they put on the starting line. They said, that's the closest we're ever going to get. So I think I'm obliged to actually turn up one year and do it.
And you qualified, so
Um, I think that was the year I did it. Yeah, yeah, I think it was the year.
but like you said, you finished in the 40s, etc. But at least you qualified for another world championship, so that's another championship that you've been to. But for me, mountain running, see, watched videos of it. One of the guys that runs another club, Andrew Douglas, he was I think he was world mountain series champion
Yeah,
twice. But you watch videos of it, and it's the gradient, the incline, and the duration that you run up the mountain for him. Like that looks
yeah,
painful.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know Andy very well, and he's done brilliantly, in the mountain running scene. He's been in GB teams for years and years and picked up loads of medals. And as you say, won the World Cup Series twice. Um, but I think he dedicated himself very much to that and did. I think Andy tried marathons a few times and wasn't quite his scene, but he found his niche and he's really gone for it. And I think it's like everything, I think if you want to do really well, you have to focus on that one thing and say, right, I'm going to train for it, I'm going to prepare properly for it, because it's not like, as you described it, it's totally different. It's a different kind of fitness that you need. It's not like run around a track. Um, it requires a different mentality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed like the Italians seem to be they were world class at it for a while, but now I've noticed a couple of Ugandans have caught on to it. Like, we can't get in the team for Uganda, so we're going to go to the mountain. And now the
Yeah.
Ugandans have started to
Well,
infiltrate it.
I think what's happening is that mountain running and ultra trail running in particular are becoming the new boom sports. And
Yeah.
as you get more and more and bigger events, then there begins to be more prize money comes in. And obviously that's going to then attract a lot of guys that maybe can't, you know, in terms of countries like Uganda and Kenya and that, where it's so difficult to make a national team, that they're going to look for other opportunities that are going around. So you see more and more of them competing
Yeah.
in these events. And I mean, it's great as well. You know, it's the profile of these events has been raised, and it's, as I said at the beginning, you know, there's so many different aspects to running now, distance running now, that you can immerse yourself in, that, you know, it doesn't have to be any one particular thing. There's just so many different opportunities out there.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And
Same with
they're all getting a higher profile. You know, the
yeah,
events aren't just little tiny local events, they're big major international events.
definitely. Because like you're saying about the profile, I think when the Italians were really dominating, and then also a few of the Ugandans. I think one of the guy who won it. I think he's ran for 5K like 13:29, which is
Yeah,
a brilliant, great time, but it's not getting him into the Ugandan team. So he was
yeah,
like, so he just sat in behind the Italian guy uphill, and then on the downhill, he's got that cadence and that speed. The
yeah,
Italian guy had great speed as well, but when you've got a 13:29 5K in your legs, like,
yeah.
and he just opened up that gap, and
It's quite a range to have if you can run that on the track and you're on the mountains as well.
absolutely. But like you said, the profile's getting, and it won't be long before like some, Clyne Journey. He's, the Ultraman. It won't be long until you get a Kenyan, etc., who decides I'm going to start doing that, and then it will just eclipse all these records.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that hasn't happened so far. You know, you think a 2:05 Kenyan marathon runner now's not going to get in the Kenyan national team. So, but you know, what could he do if he went to one of these events? But again, you know, they are different, so not necessarily going to translate into top performers in the mountains. But if you're starting with that background,
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty good.
I know you count it with a 2:05 marathon, you've done your homework at least anyway.
Aye.
Anyway, but back to you. Anyways, so that's a bit about your mountain running career. But now let's go into the juicy stuff. Let's go into your marathon career. So that's where would you say you had the majority of your success as a runner, as a marathon runner?
Yeah, I think so. And it was more, I don't say, it wasn't intentional. It was
Yeah.
like, I would rather have been a good 1500-meter runner, I think. Less painful, maybe.
Yeah.
But the stimulus for it, in a way, coming from Aberdeen, Aberdeen's got a tremendous tradition in the marathon. And I was training with guys, lots of good marathon runners. One of them was a guy called Alistair Wood, who ran 2:13:45 in 1966, which was one of the fastest times in the world at that time.
Mhm.
And Alistair we used to do a long run from Alistair's house every Sunday. So there was him, there was another guy with great influence on me, Mel Edwards, who was a 2:18 marathon runner, but probably would have gone on to run a lot quicker had it not been for injuries. He was affected by injuries just when he was at the peak of his career. And he'd finished second behind a Japanese guy who went on to be silver medalist in the Mexico Olympics. So he was very good. A guy called Colin Youngson, who again about a 2:16 marathon runner, Scottish champion. Alistair was Scottish champion 6 times.
Mhm.
So there was all these guys that had done it in the 60s and 70s. My contemporary, Graham Lane, who ran in the 82 Commonwealth Games, he was seventh there. We were roughly the same age and roughly the same level in just about everything we did. And in 1981, Graham said, "Oh, I'm going to do this new marathon, this first London marathon." And I thought, "Oh, okay, good luck." And the same weekend as that first London marathon, I was running for Scotland in the World Cross in Madrid. So I went to Madrid, he went to London, and of course, no social media in these days. It was difficult finding out what was happening. But when we got back after the weekend, I was reading about the London Marathon. So Graham finished fifth in the London Marathon. He ran 2:13:59.
Wow.
Wow. I'm thinking, I'm beating him a lot, you know, in everything else. So that kind of set me thinking, I need to give this a go. And so that probably Graham was my motivation for doing it, because I trained sometimes with him in racing. He would beat me, I would beat him. There wasn't a lot in it at any time. And I just felt, well, if he can do that, surely I can manage something similar. And so between that plus the background, all the people that were there to give you good advice, I thought, yeah, I'm going to give it a go. So I did my first one in September 1981. It wasn't as successful as Graham's. I did it off the back of a track season. So the longest race I'd done all summer was 5,000 meters on the track. And I thought, okay, I'll waltz into this marathon. It was my local marathon. Aberdeen had a marathon at that time, but they had an international race within it. So they had home countries international. And it was an absolutely awful day with wind and rain, cold and miserable. It was absolutely terrible. But I found the pace really easy, and I thought, this is a piece of cake, Got to 20, maybe 21 miles or so, and I'm with the leading group, and I thought, right, this is it, make a break. So I went for it, got a wee bit of a gap, and then about another mile down the road, the wheels came off. But, oh no. So cut a long story short, I ended up, it was 1 in 2:21. I was fourth in 2:23, but I lost all of that in the last couple of miles.
Wow.
So I realized, there's a bit more work to be done. So that was a kind of, it was probably a good learning experience for the first one, because coming from the track, I found the pace, so comfortable, because obviously it was a lot slower than I'd been racing at and training at. But I didn't have that endurance. I didn't have the speed endurance, the ability just to keep running at a decent pace for 26 miles. So kind of had to readjust things. So it took me a wee while actually to get to grips with it. I think I was really lucky in that I got a bit of a breakthrough. I'd run three of them, and it was 2:23, 2:20, 2:19. And then I got the chance to go to America. It was totally unexpected. It was during the winter. I was training for cross country, although I had my eye on that year's London Marathon. And I got a phone call from somebody at Scottish Athletics saying, "Hey, would you like to go to a race in California?" Now, this is January. And I'm thinking, California sounds like a good thing to do in the Scottish winter. And it was only later in the conversation, I said, wait a minute. I said, what distance is it? I was thinking a 10K. I said, oh, it's a marathon. I thought, oh, God. I said, I'm not really ready for a marathon. I said, well, it's a deal. Bob Dalgleish from the Glasgow Marathon has got this deal with the Oakland Marathon just across the bay from San Francisco, whereby they've asked for a couple of Scottish runners, and they'll send a couple of American runners over to Glasgow later in the year. So Bob had recommended you. So I said, okay, right, it's too good an opportunity. I'll go for it. And I went and I thought, oh, I'm not really ready for the marathon yet. But they had a half marathon on as well. And I thought, I wonder if I could transfer into the half marathon. But when I got there, it was very obvious, no, you're doing the marathon, you have to do the marathon. So the day the race came round, and again, I thought I was going to get sunshine. It was abysmal. It was exactly the same as Aberdeen. It was wet, cold, and windy. I was listening to the other guys before the race, and they were all going, oh, conditions are terrible. And I'm thinking, actually, this is what I'm used to. This is what I do all the time. And at the end of the day, it was an out and back course, out into the wind behind on the way back. So I kind of tucked in on the way out, and then on the way back, I just went for it at about 21 miles. But this time, I actually could keep it going. So I won that in 2:18:18, I think it was. But I won by 3 minutes, and I did most of that damage in the last 10K.
Wow.
I just really, I just went for it, and I felt total opposite of my first one. I just felt absolutely brilliant. And it was only afterwards they told me that they'd come close to cancelling the race because of the weather. Well, what? It's just a typical Aberdeen day.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
and after that, then from that race, I'm guessing you won prize money, etc., because you won it.
Well, the best story about that is, as I say, they had this deal with the Glasgow Marathon to send a runner back, but they also had a deal with races in New Zealand and Japan. But they hadn't expected me to win it because the first prize was an all expenses paid trip to the Glasgow Marathon. So I thought, that's great. I've come all the way to California and I've won a trip to Glasgow.
That's brilliant.
But they juggled things around, and what I ended up did pretty well out of it because I then got the chance to go to Japan to do the Fukuoka Marathon, which again at the time was one of the biggest well, most prestigious ones in the world.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it did open a lot of doors because I ran 2:14 at London that year, but because of the win in Oakland, I got an invite to the US Championships in 1980, the following year in '84, and the reason for that was the guy that was in charge of um, invitations for that had actually been at Oakland that day. And he said, I know how bad the weather was, so I know that 2:18 was worth a lot more. So that was a brilliant opportunity to get that.
Yeah.
And I went there, and that's where I ran 2:11 and finished second. And that was yeah, obviously a bit of a highlight, finishing second in the US Championships. But for me, it was a strange race, and it highlights how you should never ever go by planning to run a certain pace or a certain time. You've got to run by how you feel, because I got to 10 miles in that race, and the lead pack had opened a gap, and I looked at my watch and I thought, oh, I'm probably going to run about 2:14 if I just keep going like this. And I thought, no, I'm actually feeling okay. Let's just go for it and see what happens. I thought, if I blow up, there's nothing lost. If I keep going like this, I'm going to run the same time as I did earlier in the year. If I go for it, you never know what might happen. So from 10 to halfway, I ran quite hard to catch the group. And I did. I got on the back of the group. And of course, I'd been running faster than they were to get there. So once I got there, I got a bit of a breather because they were just continuing at the pace they were going at. And so I just ran with the group for another couple of miles. And I thought, I'm actually feeling quite good.
Yeah.
And the course it was kind of gently undulating, nothing serious, but every time there was a little incline, I thought, right, I'll just put in a wee surge and see what happens. Every time I did that, a couple of guys would drop off the back. And I thought, oh, okay. So I kept doing this until we got to, there'd been about 12, 14 guys in the group, and it was whittling down, whittling down. We got to 21 miles, it was down to 3.
Mhm.
And I looked, there was a Swedish guy, Eric Stahl, who had finished 4th in the World Championships the year before. So I thought, okay. And the other guy was an American running his first marathon. And I didn't know anything about him other than that. And the one other fact I knew about him was, though, that he was a sub 4 minute miler. And I thought, well, there's one or two things might happen here. He might blow up, or he might just take off. So anyway, I tried again. I had another, I was still feeling fine, 22, 23, got a wee bit of a gap on the Swedish guy, just maybe 5, 6 seconds. And this other guy still on my shoulder. And I thought, okay, right, have another go. So 23 to 24, I had a big dig, and he just sat there. And I
Yeah.
looked out the corner of my eye and I thought, oh no, he's looking so comfortable. And but by this time I'm beginning to feel it.
Yeah.
I think, right, you got to be careful. You're running really well. I've no idea what time I'm running. I'm just running by feel. Just I'm still feeling good. But I thought I can't push it anymore, otherwise I'm in danger of really blowing up. So I kind of just kept it going, kept it going. 25-mile mark, he just took off. He just went. And I thought, right. And I had a wee look behind. I could see the other guy wasn't far behind. I thought, if I try and go with him, there's a danger I might lose even second place. So I decided to settle for what I'd got because I knew I could keep that pace going. And so I finished about 20 seconds behind, but that was all done in that last mile. And I mean, I ran the last 25 to 26 in 4:50 or something. So that guy was running like 4:30. I mean,
At
that
the
was
end of the marathon.
sub 4 minute mile pace. But so yeah, so I did 2:11. The first time I knew the time was when I looked at the clock when I finished. I thought, wow. And the first thing that struck me was nothing about finishing second there or the prize money or anything else. It was I've broken Alistair Wood's Aberdeen club record.
Yeah.
That was the main thing
You've done it.
because it had
You,
stood from 1966,
oh
So
yeah,
so that was yeah, that was good.
that was amazing. And what was the name of the American guy that won it?
It's a guy called Kenny Martin who he went on to finish third at New York the following year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he ran 2:09.
Wow.
Um, and he married an Australian, Lisa Martin, who was a Commonwealth marathon champion. So yeah, he was actually, apart from being a sub 4 minute miler, I think he ran for the United States in the steeplechase as well,
Oh.
some games. So yeah, very, very good athlete, and went on to be an even better marathon runner.
Yeah, exactly. And sub-format, he's got great range into a marathon as well, and oh,
Yeah,
people chase as well. It's amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Would you say that was that like the highlight of your marathon?
Um, yeah, I think so. Well, there's so many things that, I take personal satisfaction in, they're maybe not outstanding things, but I won that Oakland Marathon twice, second in the US Championships. I was sixth at Berlin in 1984, which, and obviously things have moved on in Berlin. I think I looked back last year and I think the time I did in Berlin for sixth place would have got me about 40th place last year. So it just shows how the standard has rocketed since then. But I really enjoyed Berlin. Even then, it was interesting because at that time it was still in West Germany.
Yeah.
So the race started at the Brandenburg Gate and the wall was still there. I remember looking up and seeing these East German security guards with their guns looking down. I thought, oh, that guy could do a lot of damage if he decides to open fire because there's thousands of people massed on the other side of the wall waiting to run a marathon. Um, but the Berlin, even then, I rated atmosphere-wise, it was fantastic.
Mhm.
Poured with rain that day, and yet the crowds were phenomenal. And it was a really quite a close race. There were, I think, till about 20 miles. There was a couple of guys away out in front, and then there was a group of about 20.
Mhm.
And the final 2 miles, we came right up the Kurfürsten Dam to the finish. And it was like a 5K race. I just remember sprinting. And I, I think from fourth to 10th, there was only maybe a minute between everybody at the finish. But it was like running for, 23 miles and then doing a 5K time trial. But the crowds were fantastic. It was amazing. Just really, really good.
Yeah.
So there was that. Um, yeah, can't think of anything too outstanding beyond that. I had a lot of races, marathons, finished a lot of second places actually. was second in Melbourne, second in Casablanca. That was interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say Casablanca Marathon.
Yeah, well, yeah, they decided apparently this was 1988, I think. They wanted to get on, the big city marathons were developing, and Morocco wanted to create this big marathon.
Hmm.
So they put together this big international field, but it didn't quite have the top level guys. They were wanting, you know, Steve Jones and Carlos Lopez, the world record holders and Olympic champions, but they got people like me instead. But there's a bizarre story behind that race, in that there was a half marathon started at the same time, but you had no idea who was in the marathon, who was in the half marathon, because the half marathon finished at halfway in the marathon. So you didn't know whether to go with guys or not. There was people running, think, he looked like he's doing the whole distance. So it was only after halfway that you knew.
Yeah.
And there was a guy way out in front, but me and this Czech runner eventually caught him. It was a Brazilian guy. We caught him and passed him. And we got to about 23 miles and we were just chatting. It's actually feeling really good that day. And he said, well, we just run in together. And I said, well, I was thinking about it. I thought, yeah, well, why not? If I do that, then I don't have to bust a gut and save myself for another race later on.
Yeah.
So that was fine. We kind of ran together until 50 meters from the line and he sprinted.
Oh, what a rascal.
Can you imagine I said, I'm not very happy with that. In other
That's
words, um,
quite sneaky.
it wasn't very, very good, but it was a lesson learned, don't ever get involved in trying to stage a finish.
No,
That's no,
at the end of the day, it's a race. It's there to be
yeah,
won.
absolutely. Yeah. So it was, but the guy got a lot of stick from the other guys for doing it. But yeah, it was just another interesting experience.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else. Yeah, I didn't do any Scottish marathons, Scottish Marathon Championship until I was way past my best. I
Yeah.
decided there's another of these tick boxes. I thought I've never won the Scottish Marathon Championship. I'd better have a go. So,
Yeah.
so I did that. I think I ran my first one when I was 37,
Mhm.
and then I ran it 5 times and I won it 5 times. Last time I was 43, I think. So they were never, they weren't fast times, but the best guys didn't do it. There were so many other marathons that there was no real incentive, no
Mhm.
real motivation to do it. So as I say, for me, it was a case of can't finish my running career and not have won the Scottish Marathon Championship.
Yeah.
But if you look at the best guys, Alistair Hutton never won it. We never ran it. John Graham never ran it.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of them just never bothered because in the 80s there were too many other big races with obviously bigger incentives.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, some fantastic experiences beyond just results, just being part of things like the World Cup Marathon, which I did in 1985 in Hiroshima in Japan, and in Seoul in 1987. That was the year before the Olympics, so they were using the Olympic course. So it
Mhm.
was kind of a dry run for that. And the British team, we stayed at a holding camp outside Tokyo, which again was a test for the team to use that the
Mhm.
year after in 1988. Um, and yeah, I mean, these races were incredible at the time. I ran 2:16 and finished 48th. It's like at that time, I think that was, if you looked at it, it would be like the best time for finishing 48th in a marathon.
Yeah.
All the guys run pretty close to the world record, finishing fifth, sixth. It's just phenomenal. And just good experience and being amongst all these other top athletes who, the guy, I think the guy who was fifth, an Italian guy, Galindo Borden. He
Mhm.
was fifth in Seoul at the World Cup, and then the following year at the Olympics, he won the gold medal. I, I remember I remember him thinking, oh, he's quite stocky, he's quite a bulky guy. I thought he won't be able to do very well.
Right. Obviously, somehow it worked for him though. He also
Oh yeah, yeah.
like,
I,
Olympic champion. Wow, that's
oh yeah, yeah.
like,
Brilliant. I think he was about
get to that. But
2'8" guy.
2-8
Yeah.
one. Back in those days, 2-8 was that was world.
Pretty
That
close.
was
Yeah, well, Lopez set the world record, wasn't it? 2'7".
aye, yeah,
Yeah. And
definitely 2-7.
that was in pretty basic shoes.
Yes. Well, that's the next thing. That's the next thing I was going to talk to you about. Those marathons, So with the super shoes, etc. as well. I mean, like, how much faster do you think you could have ran if you did have a pair of Alpha Flies?
It's really I've followed some of the discussions about this. A lot of my contemporaries saying, "Oh, we need to take 4 minutes off our times." It's like instead of age graded times, we'll have shoe graded performances.
Well, it's not
But
an impossibility.
I don't think you can compare. You can't say, "Oh, if I wore these, I would be this much faster." I don't think you can compare across the generations because in the 80s, the guys from the 60s and 70s said, "Oh, you've got better shoes than we had," and da 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 da. So, every generation past thinks, things are better in the future, so we could have done better. But I think all you can do is look at where you were at the time relative to what the best was at the time. So, if you were if the world record's 2'8" and you've done 2:15, so you're 7 minutes behind the world record. So today that would mean, to be the equivalent of a 2:15 runner, would you be a 2:8 runner? I I don't know. I just don't think, there's so many factors that come into play that you can't really say one of them would make the difference. Undoubtedly, the shoes, I think, help you make you run quicker. I've got a pair of, I don't have the top of the range stuff, but I've got one of the cheaper versions, and I did a test the other year. I ran park run, and I would run it with an ordinary pair of trainers one week, and the following week I'd wear these shoes and I'd run a minute quicker.
Oof.
Now, I'm sure there's a bit of psychology. As soon as you put the shoes on, you think, okay, I'm going to run faster, and you probably try a little bit harder, but they just feel so different. They just feel like when you begin to tire, it's like I'm still bouncing along. And I've at a relatively slow pace, uh, but I think the shoes. But there's so many other things. There's now so many more people seriously competing in marathons. If you just look at the Kenyans and Ethiopians, if you look at the world top 100 any year, 98 of them are Kenyan or Ethiopian. Now, if you go back to my era, my best year, I have the world top 100 list, and there were, I think, two Kenyans. Oh no, the world top 50. There were two Kenyans and five Brits. So, it's a different world. There were fewer opportunities for Kenyan runners to compete internationally compared with now. Had there been more of them then, would the standard have been higher then because there would have been more of them competing against each other? I don't know. So it's really difficult, bottom line, to say, you know, what influences performance, what influences times. And yeah, it'd be nice to think, yeah, if I had these shoes back then, I could have run 4 minutes quicker, but that's not reality, is it? It's like you do what you can with what you've got at the time, and that's what it is. And you can't, I wouldn't want to take a claim that, oh, if a Scottish runner run 2:9
Mhm.
this week, that actually, with me being 2:11, I'm actually quicker than him because I had bad shoes. You know, you
Yeah.
can't do that. You still have to train, you still have to do the race, you still have to do the distance. And yeah, the technology might give you a little bit of an advantage, but you can't, as I say, I don't think you can compare one generation with another. You can only look at it within the period, the era you're living in.
Yeah. Like you said, though, you still need to train. You still need to put the hours in. You still need to put the miles in.
Yeah,
The shoes you can't just turn up not fit and then you run 2:09 with a pair of shoes. You still need to
yeah,
train like a demon. That's what you
yeah,
do.
yeah. But
It's all part of a bigger picture.
even it's not just the shoes, the kit as well. My first international vest was a thick cotton
Yeah.
vest that, if it was hot, it stuck to you. So, it's not a major thing, but just the fact now you've got all the material now which keeps you cool.
Mhm.
It's all contributing to helping with your performance, and so there's all sorts of little things that change.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got like the vests for a running club now, and they're the sore vests, and you don't even notice they're on you when you get into
Yeah,
that hard part of the race. You feel nice and cool. So yeah,
yeah,
the technology is definitely making inroads into performances, and even at
yeah.
club level. So
Right. But as I say, I can only see how you compare with your contemporaries, and because
yeah,
you've all got the same.
oh yeah, absolutely. But
I don't know how all the ruling about shoes should be available to everyone. There's a level playing field, but when you start charging 300 quid for a pair of shoes, it's not really making it open to everybody, is it?
yeah, not everyone can afford that. So I
No.
mean, I'm not. I've got a pair of Alpha Flies, but I'm no. I've seen the new Nikes. I'm not buying them. I'm not paying them. 300 quid for a shoe that I would only use them for marathon. Like that's the only distance I would use them at.
Yeah,
Because I've got a pair of 4% sitting there as well. I use them for shorter distances, like over 5K. But my best 5K time came from wearing a pair of Asics Piranhas, which are which have got nothing to them.
yeah,
So like, and that's got no carbon. It's literally a glorified sand shoe. And my best 5K time came in that. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
mind you, I was at a different fitness level back then. So if I can get back to that fitness and wear the 4%, I can make a comparison. But the
yeah.
fact is, I was faster in my in my Asics sand
I'll
shoes.
get your fitness back and give it another go.
Yeah, absolutely. But talking about the shoes, but the train as well. So also get only what's the time here? Only get about 10 minutes or so left. But what was your typical like training week when you were training for the marathon at peak? So what was a typical mileage or sessions, etc. for yourself?
Um, well, I didn't keep great records, and I think it's one of the good things nowadays about having the technology, Strava, Garmin. At least you can record it and you've got a record there. I've got pretty rough notes, but it varied through the year. I mean, the year I ran my best marathon times and some of my best races, I averaged 75 miles a week. But that would be weeks of over 100 and weeks sometimes with just 25. And I did quite a lot of racing. In
Mhm.
fact, in the 9 weeks up to my best marathon, I raced 6 times, including there was a couple of short cross country races, a 10K, a half marathon, and a leg on that Edinburgh to Glasgow relay, which was 7 miles. And I was running 90 to 100 miles a week
Mhm.
through that period as well. So, but it's difficult just to take one little block, and say, that was the most important part. But I think in terms of sessions, I never run. Well, I don't know how far my longest runs were. I just went out for time, so I
Yeah.
never ran for longer than 2 hours 25 minutes,
Hmm.
maybe 2.5 hours at the very maximum.
Hmm.
But quite a lot in the 2 hours to 2:20 range. That would be my long run, and they would usually be as you feel. So I would run a little bit and meet some other guys. We'd probably do about um, 10, 12 miles together and that would depend. The pace of that would depend on who was feeling good and whether he could be bothered going with it. So it was almost like an informal fartlek, it would be, or tempo. You could run hard for a couple of minutes, and then the next hard bit might be for 3 or 4 miles, and then would finish off quite easy. So the long runs were always varied paced runs, but usually over very undulating routes. Majority of, or probably 60 to 70% would be off road. So it's like forest trails and up and down hills. Rarely flat, maybe just the last few miles would be flat. And I think that was a big benefit. I think the strength you get from running up and down hills is fantastic, and I did a lot of hill reps in my training for marathons. At least one session a week. At the beginning of a block, I experimented with doing 3 hill sessions a week for 3 weeks. So it's like you come out of that, you just feel so strong. And I think it's good for conditioning as well, because hills it's the complete workout for runners. You're driving from the hips, powering up the hill, extended knee lift, using your arms, and it's getting a good cardiovascular workout without having to reach the same speed, obviously, as if you're on the flat. So I just found that was such a great base to have and to build from. And the other sessions I did quite a lot of short reps, but quite a lot, like 20 by 200 by short recovery,
Yeah.
3 sets of 10 by 150 with a short recovery, and then mile reps. So we do, but no more than six by a mile, with a decreasing recovery over the block. So it'd start off with quite a long recovery, might have 3 or 4 minutes recovery, but by the end I'm down to 1 minute recovery, and trying to run them at the same pace as I did with the big recoveries. And if you can do that, you know that you're getting fitter and stronger. So that kind of combination, the short, sharp reps for the speed, the longer reps for being able to maintain it, and then the mixed long runs, that was a basic combination. There was nothing very scientific about it, but
Yeah.
yeah, produced reasonable results. So yeah, happy.
Definitely. I would
Yeah.
say more than reasonable. More than reasonable results for
Well,
yourself. But
I,
but
but
you've had
it evolved over the years as well. I think you build up to doing that sort of stuff and find out what you can actually handle, and what works for you. Experimented with some things that,
Mhm.
but no, that's not for me. I either didn't produce the results, or I didn't like doing them in the first place. And if you don't like doing them, you're not going to do them well. So
Exactly. I mean, you have got to find out what works for you. But no, I agree with that. No, hills are key for a runner. They might not feel like your best friend, but they are your best friend.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They really, really are. But just finally, before we head off, just a couple of wee fun questions for you, just to get your what your thoughts are, etc., and what's your just a couple of wee fun ones as well. But so what we like to ask is like, who is your favourite male runner of all time?
Lassie Viren,
Oh, that's it.
yeah, double Olympic champion, 5 and 10,000 meters twice.
Yeah.
Uh, and I actually met Lassie Viren at his home in Finland about 20 years ago. And that was a
Nice.
highlight for me, being able to speak to him. And it was me and 2 or 3 other guys. And one of the guys said, Lassie said, "You're not even the fastest marathon runner in the room," because his PB is 2:13. And
Wow.
he said, "Yeah, that may be true, but how many Olympic medals has he got?"
That's true.
Fair enough.
Olympic gold medals.
Yeah. So yeah, no, he was just at that time, when before I'd really got into the sport, I remember being fascinated by him and his duels with Brendan Foster. I like
Mhm.
watching Brendan running as well. But Lassie would be my number one.
Excellent. And also this next question is that who is your favourite female runner?
Ooh, that's a more difficult one, but I would probably say Greta Weitz, Norwegian. who won New York Marathon about 9 times, world record holder for the marathon in the 80s. And I met her a couple of times as well. So I think it's, that's one of the other great things about running. I'd watch these people on the TV, and then a few years later, you're actually speaking to them, and they're just like your mate from down the road. There's
Yeah.
no airs and graces about any top runner I've met. There's nothing, no superiority thing about them at all. You can have a chat like, Lassie Veern, quadruple Olympic champion Greta Weitz. They could be your club mate that's never broken 5 hours for the marathon, the way they would speak to you. They're very humble, very nice people, and yet they are superb athletes. So these two qualities are the things that make them people that I looked up to.
Oh, that's the main thing, isn't it? And one last, just it's not even a question, it's just well, it is a question. But one last thing before we go is, like, what advice would you give to like any kind of runner out there, like in terms of training or racing advice, etc.?
I think couple of things. The main thing is, as I said just a wee while ago, you got to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not going to do it. And if you enjoy it, you'll do it forever. And that's the main thing. So whatever you choose, and as I've said, the great thing about running is there's so many choices. You might have this aspiration to run a marathon, but actually you might get more enjoyment out of doing a hill race or a 5K, whatever. Find what you like, what you enjoy doing. Don't be pressurized into doing something you don't want to do because somebody else is doing it or wants you to do it. Just enjoy it. In terms of training, probably do less than you plan to do, because I think most people overdo it. And when you train, you shouldn't be racing. Keep your 100% effort for the races. And in training, you're looking for that improvement. You're wanting to, what I describe as, you're wanting to push that door a little bit even more open all the time. You don't want to punch a hole in it. You want to gradually be improving, getting that little bit better, but without absolutely gutting yourself. If you picture training at the right level, you'll be able to train consistently well a lot more often. If you train too hard, then your recovery is going to be so long between sessions, or you're not going to recover at all, and you'll just get worse and worse. So try and find that balance. Keep as fresh as you can. Keep recovery. Recovery is as important as any of the sessions that you do.
Absolutely. Well, Fraser, it's been amazing chatting to you, and again, it's been great to get for me, another Scottish running legend onto the podcast, and thank you for
No, it's
for, for all
been
your
good.
stories.
Always good to chat about running.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and hopefully obviously this podcast is, like, from your advice there, lets people know that it's not all about going hammer and tong and training all the time, and
No,
you know, and you're
no,
a perfect example of that.
yeah, and as people say, there's no limits to what you can achieve if you put your mind to it. If you're healthy, get on with it. And I when I started off, I'd never, my first aspiration was to maybe make Aberdeen University's first team. That was it.
Yeah,
So you just there's no limits to what you can do.